Okay, in this one, I'm going to subject you to my fall vacation pictures. I wanted to go to Omaha Beach and Utah Beach in France, and I looked, I kind of a World War II buff, so wanted to go there and see what these places look like and kind of compare it to what I've read. So I did. Now, all I took was pictures. I did very little video. I've got a little bit of it in here, but I'm going to go over what I saw and what I thought of it. And you may be interested, you may be not. You can just turn it off if you don't like it. But this is what I saw. And I'm going to give you a series of pictures here and try to explain what this was all about. Now, the first one is at Omaha Beach. Now, Omaha Beach was a really nasty landing. The uh, the casualties were extremely high. From what I've read, they never will know the total casualties here. Uh, there was just too many units that were just almost wiped out. So I took a tour bus down here, and this first one is a picture of the beach. It doesn't tell you much. This is a kind of a little resort now. You can rent boats and stuff and go out on the water. But uh, when we get down to the water, uh, this is a little bit later in the day. The tide has come in. When the Higgins boats landed, they landed when the tide was quite a ways out, and so it would go a long way out there before you get to that little bluff you see there, uh, which is where a lot of soldiers ended up just kind of hiding behind that thing because the fire was so heavy. Uh, what really happened here is the the commanders wanted to land near a road, and there were several roads going to the beach, and so they wanted their people to get off the landing craft and come up and take those roads so we would be able to travel inland with our vehicles. Well, the problem was, here you can see a bluff on the left side. Uh, Over towards the right of that picture is a road that comes down here. You can't really see it here, but if you look at that bluff, it's all covered with vegetation. The camouflage would be absolutely perfect. Uh, and if you look on the other side, there's bluffs up there too. They don't seem to be, at least not now, covered with as much vegetation. But between those two was where they wanted to land the people and get off the beach. The problem was it was an absolute perfect crossfire because there were bunkers uh, and artillery and mortars all on either side of that road. And getting across there was just going to be murder, and it really was. So everybody kind of jammed up right on the edge of that little, uh, almost like a breakwater, and nobody wanted to move any farther because if you went over that edge, you would end up in a minefield. First, there was barbed wire entanglements, and then it was minefields. Uh, I don't know how far back the minefields went, but it was a pretty murderous mess. Wide open. You couldn't see who was firing at you, but they could easily see you. So the casualties on that beach were pretty incredible. And here I took a shot. Uh, it's hard to see this thing. There was a place called Point du Hoc, which was some cliffs right on the water. And in the mist, you can see those. That Point du Hoc, kind of to the left of center. That was where gun emplacements were supposed to be. And these gun emplacements would fire up to 15 miles. Well, this is about 10 miles away. So they could fire on the beach right down parallel to the beach. So we had some rangers, and I shouldn't caution you on this. I'm not going to talk about which units were used for each one. That's, I'm just showing my impressions, and I'm not trying to give a history or anything. But these rangers climbed those cliffs to put those guns out of action, and uh, they could have easily attacked uh, this beachhead. So let's take a look at what what was on Point du Hoc. By the way, the guns were not there. There had been, who knows what the reason is. The guns were set back uh, far away from that point, either because they hadn't put them in yet, which I don't think really was true, but or there was so much bombing in that area that they didn't want the guns there because they're just going to lose them. Now, looking at this one, this is a bunker that was there. It's not for the guns they were talking about because the guns they were going to put in there had a 360-degree firing range. And you can see on this one picture one of those mounts for the guns, and it's a circular mount. So that's where the guns would have been put. Now, this bunker uh, is partially destroyed. I don't know if it was destroyed by a bomb or just fell apart. Uh, it's kind of interesting. If you look close at this thing, it was not a solid piece of concrete. They actually made little pieces. I'm sure they set up forms and poured in small amounts. You can see on the right there, there's some rebar and stuff sticking out. And they would put rebar in one piece, pour it, and then they'd take the rebar would stick out of that piece and they'd pour another one on top of it. Now it looks like kind of bricks in there. But anyway, that one was pretty well destroyed. This one was back from the beach, probably several hundred yards. There were two bunkers there, and there's another bunker that was right at the edge, and this one's pretty much intact. And it's just right there at the very edge. And there's a shot of the aperture that the defenders could shoot out of, and there's another one too. Uh, this thing, I went inside it, and you can see there's the behind it. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there in different places for storage and so on. And then there's one here that shows the aperture from the inside. That to me seemed like a death trap, being as it was right on the edge of that cliff. If guys come up over the cliff, they were of course exposed there, but they also were close enough they could have thrown grenades in that silly thing or fired into the aperture or whatever. It did not seem that that was a very safe place to be. And so that was pretty ugly. Now, for reasonings behind why they didn't have the guns there, I took a few pics here. These are bomb craters, pretty good sized bomb craters here that they were everywhere up there. And uh, I can understand why the guns weren't there because it was just a mess. The guns probably would have been destroyed if they were there. And looking kind of on this one pic, you can see, yeah, I couldn't get really close to the edge, but it is a cliff. And on the left there, that's that bunker. And guys would be coming up right in front of that bunker. Uh, Dangerous for both sides, I think. But yeah, it was a cliff, and it was pretty high. So uh, that was that was something that was pretty interesting to go through and to see just what had happened there. I don't think if the guns had been there, I don't think they'd have been effective anyway because I think they've been destroyed. So, and there's concrete laying all over the place up here from where the bombs exploded and damaged some of the emplacements. Now, the next one I went to was Utah Beach. Well, it was entirely different. Uh, they didn't take very many casualties. They got off the beach right away. Uh, some of these pictures I'm showing you here are of the beach. It's a long beach. I'm sure there were plenty of obstacles out there in the water. All that stuff's gone now, but the GIs ended up having to come across that beach. Uh, but the only place where there was really enemy could be emplaced was right at the edge. Uh, and I didn't take enough pictures of this, so it doesn't show it as well as it could. But in this one, by the way, that's a Higgins boat. It's not really a Higgins boat. it's just a mock-up because I want to get on a thing that's made out of steel, and the Higgins boats were not out of steel; they're made out of plywood. But it was just something that was there. What you see in the background there, the beach is right back behind there. There's these little bluffs uh, before you get to the beach, and they're right close to the beach. I suppose they could have had emplacements along there, but there weren't. There were no high bluffs behind or anything like that. This was all pretty low lying land, and uh, any any troops that were on these little bluffs there next to the ocean, they were probably dealt with pretty quick. Uh, they may have had mortars behind them and bringing some high trajectory fire in there, and no doubt was minefields and barbed wire. But the behind that bluff, and I'll see if I have a picture here that kind of gives. Okay, I was taking a picture of a tank, and the beach is right behind where I am taking the picture. This land is all very low. Some of it's actually lower than the ocean. So they didn't have the advantages that they had in Omaha Beach, and this one was taken very quickly. Uh, Another shot here. Uh, that's what's left of a tank wall. That was about a foot thick, and it went across uh, this little road thing that's going down the beach. Uh, Not terribly effective. There's no rebar in it or anything. So all it took was a small amount of explosive, and they just blew the thing out of the way. So it was a much different ball game at Utah than it was at Omaha. Uh, Low casualties, the whole bit. Uh, Another part of this I wanted to go over that I'm always interested in the machines that are used in war, and uh, this picture, like I was showing you a little earlier, that's a Sherman tank, and it's one that the hull was cast steel. I'll show you another one that the hull was made mostly of plates. Uh, but this one was cast steel. And what was interesting about it is they came with a 75 millimeter gun, and it was a fairly short barrel. This one does not have that short barrel gun. It's got the long barreled 76 millimeter. And even though it's just 1 millimeter bigger, uh, it was far more effective against opposing tanks because the muzzle velocity is so much higher. Uh, and I thought it was kind of interesting to take a few pictures of this tank. And I'll show you another one that I thought was kind of interesting. This one here, you can see it has a different hull. It's made out of plate. It's just plates welded together. Uh, this glaze plate on the front, uh, it was about an inch and a half or 2 inches thick. Wasn't terribly thick, probably pretty easily penetrated. Uh, and this was at a museum, and it was kind of interesting. Right next to it was this gun here. I'm showing you the very front of it. That's an 88 millimeter German dual purpose uh, artillery. That was the nemesis Sherman tank. Uh, if that gun hits you with a round, it probably would penetrate almost anywhere on the tank. Uh, and I got to looking around at this gun. It's just kind of interesting to look close. Uh, and I noticed here's a spot on the breech where they've actually welded these parts together. Uh, I'm not thinking I would ever want to do that. Uh, that was a very high pressure inside that barrel, and the welds look really flaky. I think they just put them in just for the heck of it. They're never going to use the gun anyway. So, and there was a museum. There's a pic of a DC-3. Uh, that was kind of interesting. Another tool they had was this mine. It's called a bouncing Betty mine. And you can see the balls, and inside is the explosive. The three little prongs on the top, if someone stepped on it, that set the mine off. Now, it didn't go off immediately. I think it had like 4/10 of a second delay. So when you stepped on it and you just kept going, it would pop up after you had made a step or two, and it would explode, and all those balls would go flying out to anyone that was around there at about waist height. So, uh, well, I didn't really say this, but it had a small explosive in the bottom of it that would pop it out of the ground to where it would explode at waist height. Uh, so another kind of interesting, although fairly nasty sort of thing. This was this church. It's an old church in a little village near the beach, Utah Beach, and it's not special in any way except that there's a story behind it, and I'll try to tell you the story. Uh, that church was being used as a hospital by two medics. Uh, these are American GIs, and the Germans and Americans are fighting literally in the courtyard, in the churchyard there, and they were fighting back and forth. These two medics were inside treating the wounded. Well, they treated something like 84 wounded soldiers and one civilian boy. And at one point, they called out of the church and told Germans and Americans both, to stop shooting so that they could get the casualties out of the churchyard, which they did. And they brought the casualties inside. Nobody bothered them the whole time. A German doctor was supposed to get there to help him, but he got killed before he got there. And some of the evidence inside the church is still there. If you look at that pew, there's blood on the pew. And there was 2 or 3 of them still had blood on them. And the uh, the members of the church just left it the way it was. And this one picture is not a very good picture, but you can see there's a hole in the top of the roof, and that was an artillery shell came through there, and it fell to the floor, but didn't go off. It fell right in the middle of the church, and of course everybody says that saved everybody in the church, which I suppose it probably did. The one other thing I wanted to go over while I was doing this is there was what was called the Bocage country, and I tried pretty hard to get some pics of it. I didn't do as good as I would like to have gotten, but uh, the Bocage country was farmland that was separated. Each person had his own land, and of course there were boundaries, and the boundaries were just filled with all sorts of brush, and so your enemy would hide in the brush, wait for you to start coming across the field, and they'd start blowing you away. And that stuff was all over the place. It was very common all around there, and I could see where that had been a real monster for the GIs to have to deal with. Uh, the last thing I wanted to go to was the cemetery, and of course, lots of white crosses and uh, and assorted memorials, you know, to the GIs that were buried there. And I'm going to finish this thing with about 2 minutes of a walk through the crosses, and that's going to be the end of this.